So you want to know about the best farming methods in Ghost of Tsushima Legends so you can get the most amount of XP and get the best rewards? Well, you came into the right video. Today we're gonna talk about the best ways to level up your characters fast and even more so to get the most amount of legendaries that you truly need. So in this video we're gonna cover pretty much everything as well as a few other tips and tricks along the line. So as always, if you enjoyed this video at any point, don't forget to leave a thumbs up on it and let's get to it. First things first, let's clear one thing out of the way, and that is the fact that quick play doesn't actually affect your XP rates one bit. It only gives you a bunch of extra resources like 75 essences and about 15 honor. So unless you really want that quick matchmaking, and even more so if you do happen to have a friend that plays alongside you, instead of doing the quick play you will want to do the manual missions. So the manual missions that are best in my experience are the first two in the chain, reason being that their maps are relatively fast, especially the first two ones out of three. They're just small camps that can easily be taken down. The second one is going to be all about the difficulty. So the difficulty that I fully recommend is the gold difficulty. Reason being is that if you progress from gold to nightmare, the only difference you're going to see is about 100 XP on that third level, but pretty much everything else stays the same. So the first two levels on gold and nightmare will always give you 100 XP, but the third one is going to give you 200 on gold and 300 on nightmare, and that is pretty much it. That is why I recommended gold. This gives you both a good amount of XP and also you have that option to get some legendaries on the side as well. We will talk about legendaries in just a little bit. Now of course some of you might be thinking that survival is better because you know it's more difficult, it takes longer to complete, and there's like way more enemies to fight. Well, that is actually not the case. In fact, you only get slightly more XP than you get from a mission, but it takes about 5 to 6 times longer to complete. So in the same amount of time you complete one single gold survival, which takes about 15 minutes, you would complete about 4, at the very least 4 story missions that gives you way more than that, maybe even a couple of levels just from doing these. That is why I'm recommending to do these missions, especially the first two ones on gold and on manual. But now this brings us to the biggest mistake that I'm seeing a ton of players do, especially when it comes to matchmaking. If you're playing with a friend, then maybe this is not going to be the case for you, but if you are matchmaking, then make sure you tell or somehow notify your teammates that you absolutely need to complete those side objectives. To put things into perspective, each of the side objectives that you complete will award 125 XP. What this means is that if you complete all of the 3 side objectives with the treasure, the lost scroll and the curse, you will get double the XP that you normally get by only completing the main maps over there. So it is absolutely worth it to hunt for these as well. So let's begin with the one that is most skipped, and I cannot believe that I have to say this, but please guys, go ahead and do the Curse of Gyozan. If you don't know where that is, let me explain it to you. So basically right before the last map that you go into any mission, so right before that last gate right there, you will notice that Gyozan is now standing with a couple of pillars on his side. There could be a couple of hearts or a couple of torches, and depending on these you will get a different kind of difficulty challenge. If you get the 2 hearts, basically it gives you a link between the 2 party mates that kind of causes damage if they split too far apart, to the point that they might die if they go too far away from one another. Meanwhile, the second one is the torches, and this is going to give both of the party mates reduced HP by half. So this is going to make that challenge that much harder, but at the same time it also counts for a bunch of achievements, it also counts for a bunch of appearance options, and even more so you will get that additional XP on top. Now for the scrolls and the chests it becomes a bit easier because you also have that notification on the top left corner of the screen that pretty much tells you if there is an additional objective in your current map. Now both the scrolls and the chests can spawn randomly in any of the 3 maps of any of the story missions. Now the thing about this is that the scrolls usually spawn in predefined spawn points, but usually there's multiple of these spawn points possible for every single one of the maps in every single one of these missions. So for these, my best suggestion is to go ahead and keep an eye out for any white bluish glow effect that you might be able to see, especially in interiors, in buildings, on top of buildings, and randomly around walls. Sometimes you might even see one of these outside of the buildings because that glow actually pierces the outer walls and you're going to be able to easily spot them, but others are a bit more difficult, so you will get used to this as you discover them, but there's also online guides for all of the possible spawn points, so I will link them down below. Now for the chests, these are going to be the easiest. I've talked about them previously, but you can easily see them by just using your focused hearing. Mark them down, maybe even set up a few barrel traps over there in case you might be overwhelmed by the enemies, and it's going to be super easy, and it also gives you that guaranteed reward at the end, that guaranteed gear piece, which might or might not turn to be even a legendary quality item. Now since we did talk about items, let's also talk about how to get unique ones and also the legendaries themselves. And I kind of want to start things off with the legendaries. You kind of have only two options right here. Now of course, obviously they can drop literally from anywhere, at any level, at any difficulty, so you can still even see them dropping with for example a bronze difficulty, but it's just going to be a lower key level. But if you truly want to go for the best ones out there, you will at least play in a minimum of gold story mission, since this is going to be the fastest and the most reliable. And even though you don't get 7 items like how you get on the survival, you still get 5, which is basically almost the same amount for a fraction of the duration. The thing about this is that there is a difference in loot quality between the gold difficulty and the nightmare mode. Personally, I have seen a way better drop chance for legendaries when playing in the nightmare difficulty, to the point that only in the nightmare difficulty it happened to me to also get 2 legendaries at the very same time. This doesn't mean that you can get it from the gold, but I'm just saying if you can complete a nightmare in a timely manner, you should definitely try to do that, since it also gives you a bunch of other rewards in there too. Now if you can't do that, then definitely stick with the gold missions, since it's still going to provide really good XP and you're still getting a ton of chances at getting additional legendaries. So this is basically how I farmed most of mine, and a few of them I was lucky enough to get them from the lower difficulties. Now this also brings us to another category of items that I do want to talk about, which are the special unique items that only drop when playing with a certain class. So for example, we already talked about the fact that certain class specific charms can only drop when playing with that specific class that I've covered in today's video, but actually it extends to a few more items than that. So for example, let's say you want to hunt for katanas, the best class to do that on is going to be the samurai. It just seems that samurai drops a ton of katanas all the time. Now if you do want to go ahead and get some bows, and even more so the longbow, that is mostly only going to drop if you play as a hunter, especially for the longbow that only seems to drop if you play as a hunter, but you're going to still fight with the RNG. Meanwhile, the Ronin is the one that only drops the bomb pack, by far the best ranged weapon out there in the game, at very least that AoE damage. It's also one of my favorites, so if you want that bomb pack that spams those explosions, you're going to want to play with the Ronin. And finally, if you want the blowgun, you will want to play as the assassin until you see one dropping. And this is basically it with the way you farm unique and legendary items in the game. But on a final note, I also want to talk about the subject of upgrading the gear in the most efficient kind of way, so that you don't waste that many resources, because you might see that there's a bunch of very important perks in there that you might want to apply to your character, and you're constantly doing this switch between reforging and rerolling on the perks, and you might just be wasting way too many resources. So first of all, until you hit 100 key with your character, try to not do that many reforges and waste any of your resources, as I've already mentioned in one of the previous videos. From that point on, what you will want to do is to not try to push 110 unless it is absolutely necessary, because it's not going to be that worth it. The difference between 105 and 110 is not that massive to warrant the thousands of resources that you will be spending. To give you an example, with this Yoshitsune's hand right here, I did a few reforges. Now it is 110 right here because I pushed with it, but basically I did a couple of reforges, and I was lucky enough that on the first 2 perks I got really desirable perks with the melee damage and ability cooldown reduction. So what this means is that I can then just go in and focus on the 3rd perk right here at the bottom, which by the way doesn't consume any honor, which is basically your cap. So this means that I can constantly use the blessings and the essences to reroll on these, go with any of the possible outcomes, and do this over and over again, because my first 2 ones were already best in slot. So if you happen to do a random reforge on your item and you see that it already gives you 2 very desirable perks, do not push it any forward unless you have literally thousands of the resources that I'm talking about in the middle right there, which are the honor. This is your biggest cap in the end game, and this is going to be really difficult to come by, especially if you want to upgrade everything to 110. So that is basically my suggestion for you guys. But again, let me know down below what was your preferred way of doing it. Let me know down below if I also missed anything. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to comment, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.